It's always lovely to be in this beautiful place, this beautiful centre, and because of all the beautiful activities that happen here constantly, I'm sure you'll agree there's a very beautiful atmosphere, right? As soon as you walk in, you can relax, you feel safe. So our theme today, building emotional stamina. And as Paramjit said, this is something that is so much needed in our world today. There is so much upheaval going on everywhere. And, you know, there's a correlation. It's a spiritual law that whatever is within is reflected without. And so seeing the state of turmoil in the world, well, we just then understand the state of turmoil within human beings. And it's happening everywhere, and we see it as well in our own lives. And we see how whatever it is we're going through inside, it has an impact on the situation around us and our circumstances. And so if, for example, you're somebody who gets angry easily, reacts a lot, your emotions are very raw, then that definitely affects your relationships, can definitely affect your job, your social networking, so many things, because of your nature. And then when somebody is more of a placid person, they attract a different kind of circumstance and type of relationship and so on. So you can see this correlation. And this correlation also extends to the environment too. And I'm going to be going a week tomorrow to COP28, which is in Dubai this year. And I know there's so much debate about it being in a massive oil-producing country, but that's another topic of its own. But even in terms of the environment, there's so much upheaval now happening in the elements. Why? Because of the upheaval that's happening within human beings. And in fact, this is one of the messages, or actually a very key message, that we have been giving at the climate change conferences since 2009, the direct correlation between consciousness and the climate. And by the way, in 2009, people thought we were a bit crazy. But now they listen, actually. They can begin to see it for themselves. But just personally, think about it. We have so many different types of emotions. You know, you can get angry, you can get sad, you can be happy, you can get elated. You know, there's, I remember once somebody had produced a poster and it had, I think, different faces showing 36 different kinds of moods. Actually, we may go through 36 different kinds of moods in a day, half a day, an hour. Our emotions fluctuate a lot. And why? Because we allow the things around us, whether it's the people, the circumstances, etc., we allow what's around us and external to us to penetrate inside of us and to change what's going on inside. So you've got this two-way thing. One is that, yes, my internal state has an impact on the atmosphere and on my life. The other is that life itself and what's going on around me has an impact on what's going on inside. So you've got this happening. So what do I have to do? How can I build up emotional stamina, or as was said, emotional resilience? I have to begin to understand this dynamic. And with emotional, or another name for it actually is emotional intelligence, and that's a phrase that's been used quite a lot. And emotional intelligence is when you're able to handle your own emotions, direct your own emotions, be the sovereign of your own emotions. And also to be able to be resilient when you're faced with the avalanche of emotions from others. I use the word avalanche because sometimes it feels like that. Somebody's angry and it's like they're throwing an avalanche onto you of angry vibrations. And the other word I'd use when it's coming from inside of you is like a tsunami, right? I'm sure you've all been in that situation where you're so overwhelmed by emotion that you just don't know what to do. But, you know, all of that, if you think about what we are made of, yes, physically we are made of physical elements, but internally we are made of consciousness, we are energy, right? How am I using my energy? And when your emotions are in a lot of upheaval and you have no control over your emotions, then what happens to your energy? What happens to your clarity? What happens to your ability to find your purpose in life? It's very, very difficult, and there's a lot of confusion. And either when the avalanche is coming to you or the tsunami is coming from the inside, you are no longer the master of your life. I remember a very lovely story from the founder, Brahma Baba. And in those early days, he empowered women in Sindh. Most of you probably know the story. But, you know, this was a revolution in that community because the women weren't even educated and they certainly weren't given a life of their own. And he empowered the women, and the women were beginning to stand up for themselves. Now, a lot of the men went abroad on business. They went abroad, they came back, and their women were different, and they didn't like it. But Brahma Baba, the founder, he knew this was God's inspiration. So he was very clear inside what he had to do. And there's the story of when his elder brother came to visit him. And you know, in many cultures, you don't disobey your elders, especially an elder male member of the family. And he was sitting there on the floor. The brother came in, sat in front of him, and just shouted at him, berated him. 45 minutes. What are you doing to our family? You can imagine. And I've heard this story from one of the elder sisters. They've all mostly passed on now. But they were little girls then, and they were watching through the blinds. And Brahma Baba just sat and listened, didn't say a word. And the brother went on, and then finally, I guess he ran out of steam and he left. So then Brahma Baba got up to come out of his room, and the little girls ran up to him. Baba, Baba, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you defend yourself? He was shouting at you. And Baba just looked at them, and Baba said, when someone feels sick, then they need to vomit it out. So he did what he had to do, and Baba did what Baba had to do. And I really like that story because here was an avalanche of emotions coming towards Brahma Baba, and yet he understood that they were not his emotions. They were the emotions that belonged to the person in front of him. And so he had a choice at that moment. Do I allow that other person's emotions to penetrate me and cause a tsunami in me? Or do I remain in my state of calm? Let him do what he wants to do and needs to do, but I need to do what I need to do. And this is where we often make a mistake. We allow other people to manipulate our emotions. And when people are very emotional, they're actually often quite manipulative. Just think about it and observe it. Oh, I can't bear it. I'm going to do this to myself. I'm going to do that. trying to make you behave in a certain way. Anyway, don't need to go into details, but emotions can be very manipulative. So if I want to develop emotional stamina or emotional resilience, there are 4 things that are important. Many more things, of course, and there are lots of different methods if you look it up. But I think one thing that is very important is self-care. And very often we are working hard, we get too caught up in things, we don't take care of ourselves, and I can speak this to myself as well as to you. We don't take care of ourselves well enough, either externally or internally. Because when are you the most likely to get emotional, to get frayed, emotional in a negative way, get irritable? When you're tired, right? Yeah? If we don't get enough sleep, if we don't eat well, we don't exercise enough, which I don't. All of this causes physical unrest, which then has an impact on the mind and the emotions. And of course, there's such a close connection between the mind and the body, very close. And of course, now it's very well recognized that many diseases are psychosomatic in origin. And very often when you remove stress particularly, then a person comes back to a greater state of health. So when there's too much pressure, too much stress, then I'm reactive, my emotions are frayed, but I also can't keep a good state of health. And so self-care is very important. So one is physical, but the other is the self-care of myself on the inside. And just discussing with somebody earlier, you know, if I find that I'm becoming emotional or I'm becoming irritable, you know, often it expresses itself like that, irritation, or get a little bit angry and so on. Then at that moment, instead of saying to myself, I shouldn't be like this, do you say that sometimes? Tell yourself off? Right? We're good at telling ourselves off, aren't we? But you know, that's the very moment to be kind to yourself. Because by telling yourself off, by struggling with your emotions, you're giving them a lot of importance and you're giving them a lot of energy. And so what began small then becomes very big. And so taking care of myself on the inside also means this, being kind and compassionate to myself. Don't get into a battle with yourself. Doesn't make sense, does it? Whoever wins, you're going to lose if you're battling with yourself. So don't. Be kind to yourself and say, okay, let me now take a pause. And there's a lot of power in just taking a pause. You give a little bit of space between what's going on, outside or inside, and you. And in that space, you can begin to gain some control. Excuse me. And I'm saying a little bit of space between what's happening and you. So this is where we come to the second step in terms of building emotional stamina, self-awareness. Because if I'm not really aware of who I am, then how will it be possible for me to gain that control or mastery over my emotions? And I prefer that word the word mastery or sovereignty, rather than control. Control can sometimes feel like a bit of a struggle, trying to control something. But I need to have a state of self-awareness whereby I'm naturally the master of myself. And when we begin to go inside, then you see many different layers, right? You see all the upheaval. And I sometimes think of the mind. Now I'm using the term mind because what's going on in the mind produces the feelings. The two are closely connected. And so, okay, sometimes I think of it like a sea. So what's going on the surface may be stormy. This happened, that happened, I wish so-and-so didn't do that. Oh, I can't bear this. You know, all those sorts of feelings. Thoughts and feelings. But just like the sea or the ocean, if you dive deep into the depths, there's stillness. And so to become self-aware, I have to dive deep beneath the surface of what I am just observing in myself. Because that's not the real me. The real me has to be constant. And when I'm in the upheaval of emotions, I'm not constant. And actually, it's very difficult for other people to trust me because they don't know how I'm going to be from one day to the next, or maybe 1 hour to the next. You know, somebody gave me shared a statistic once that if you get angry with something, that impression stays with the person for at least 6 months. Imagine. And you know when there's an angry person, you're a little bit hesitant, a little bit cautious, right? So I don't want to do that. I want to have that. But if I dive deep, I get to know and to experience my real, true self, which is constant and steady. And of course, this is the inner being. This is the soul. Not the physical. Yes, our physical bodies are very important, and we've talked about taking care of them. But self-awareness means going into the depth of the awareness of the soul itself and realizing that it's the soul itself that gets into upheaval, or the soul itself that can be calm and steady and in charge. It depends where I go on the scale. And if I go into the depths, then what do I find? Just like when you go to the depths of the ocean, you know, it's a place where light never reaches in the depths of the ocean. But you know, I'm sure you know, when they do experiments, or they go with cameras and scientists to see the depths of the ocean, the animals there are very, very colourful. Mm-hmm. Incredible. No light reaches there, but nature has its beauty. Of course, the soul is light, so the analogy only goes so far. But I go into the depths and I find the treasures of the self. I find peace. I find love. I find truth. I find purity. I find joy. Now, you could say these are emotions. I would now switch the language and say these are pure feelings. And actually, to build up emotional stamina, I have to switch from the upheaval of emotions to the steadiness and the depth of pure feelings. And this can be found through contemplating deeply on who I am. So self-awareness is very important and a great key. And I need to practice this through meditation every day. And, because it's been so long since we've been living in our true self-awareness, we need to practice. If you leave the practice for a few days, even for me, and I've been practicing for, sometimes when people say, you didn't use this term, Paramjit, but sometimes they introduce you, oh, so-and-so's been practicing meditation for over 40 years. I'm still practicing, I haven't got there yet. But in a way, yes. Even a few days and you slip back because it's not the natural, hasn't been the natural state for so long. It's a daily practice, a daily attention. And then it begins to become more and more natural for these deep inner feelings, these deep inner treasures to be driving you rather than the upheaval of emotion driving you or the external circumstance driving you. And this is an important question in emotional stability. What is driving me at any one point? So self-awareness, and I can allow those deeper treasures to drive me through life, through my thoughts, my words, my actions. Very, very different to when I'm in the upheaval, state of upheaval, and actually we can say the external's driving us, but what's happening in reality is that our ego is driving us. Because when we're not self-aware, we construct an identity that I can show to the world. And it can be to do with, my ethnicity, nationality. It can be to do with the wealth that I own. It can be to do with the position I have in my profession, whatever. But I make this construct. This is me. And everybody should see me like this. And if somebody doesn't see me like that, what happens? You feel insulted because you've been operating on the basis of your ego. So actually, this is the shift, isn't it? To true, from ego, from limited identity to true identity and true self-awareness. And then the third step, relationships. Very, very important. Of course, we've been looking at the relationship with the self, but then my relationship with others, my give and take with others. We can't just live on our own. We're not meant to be isolated, actually. Yes, there are some people who live in isolation, but a minority. Some people are forced to live in isolation, even though they don't want to be. But we are social creatures, if you like. And because if there's a tsunami of emotions going on inside, it's sometimes very difficult to be able to relate to people around me. And so if I want to have good relations with others, I have to take care of myself first and have a good relationship with myself first. I always remember one of our elder sisters who passed on in 2007. She was actually talking about leadership, but her words were very powerful. She said, if you want someone to love you, first you have to love yourself. If you want someone to respect you, first you have to respect yourself. And then, as I say, talking in the context of leadership, but we are all leaders in our own context. He said, the foremost quality of a leader is humility, so not living on the ego. And then she said, a leader is always accurate and alert. And I really took those words to heart, actually. But it shows you very clearly that if I want my relationships to be good, I need to have a good feeling inside and a good relationship with myself and know myself deeply. And of course, when we are relating to others, and we all have many relationships, we're in touch with many people, there's always a give and take. There's a constant exchange in life. And we're not, being self-aware and being the master of my own emotions, of course, doesn't mean that I'm cold or I'm indifferent to other people's suffering. And I think that's very important, because sometimes people feel that, okay, if you meditate and you become a yogi and it doesn't matter what's happening around you, it's not like that. Actually, the word that's often used, of course, is detachment, but something goes with it. In Raj Yoga teachings, we don't use the word detachment on its own. We say detached and loving, both. Because if I'm really detached in the sense that I can see clearly what is happening, I can see clearly what are the needs of others, then there's so much love in the heart that I want to help and uplift others. And so actually, when my emotions are steady and when I am in that state of self-mastery, there's a huge amount of compassion, and I'm actually then sensitive to the needs of others and sensitive to the suffering of the world. At the moment, as was said, many wars going on, as well as Israel and Gaza. We know there's Ukraine. There are 7 civil wars going on. There are wars going on in people's homes too. So much conflict. And so, yes, maybe I can't physically stop the war in this place or that place, but at least what I can do, and we have been doing at all our centres, being in meditation, sending vibrations, giving support of some kind. And yes, many of our brothers and sisters have sent physical relief of different kinds too, at different stages. We don't want to be indifferent to other people's suffering, but we also don't want to be totally overwhelmed by it so that we cannot help. Because then when there's an opportunity to make a difference, we will miss that opportunity. And that's very, very important, that we take those opportunities to support others, to help others, to uplift others. And something that's very important in giving and serving is our motivation. And this, in a way, I don't know whether it comes both in self-awareness and relationship. But if my motivation is a little bit selfish, then what I do will be self-serving. So I will want some recognition. I will want some praise. And if I don't get it, I may not continue serving. So that's not the right motivation. And another thing is that I may want to make someone dependent on me. That's not a right motivation. Another is that I may want something from the other person. That's not a right motivation. And sometimes it can happen very subtly, actually. So, along with being the master of my emotions, along with having compassion and empathy and serving, my motivation must be very clean and pure and honest. There really is not enough honesty and truth in this world. And we live in the age of post-truth, that is called. And all the AI technology that's with us. On the one hand, in certain areas like healthcare, it's brilliant. It makes such a difference to diagnosis, to treatment. But in other areas, it brings a lot of falsehood and deception. We have to be so clear and so alert. And it's very difficult sometimes to see truth from falsehood. And this is where, if I'm self-aware, coming back to that, it's a foundation actually. If I'm self-aware, my inner instinct and my inner conscience will work. So I will get a feeling what is right and what is not right. So I'm not deceived. And I mustn't deceive myself through my own selfish motives either. And then the fourth step, transformation. Because we want to achieve all this, we want to have good relationships, we want to be the master of our emotions so that, when somebody comes to me and gets angry, well, the driving force is not, I've got to get angry back, but more the deeper love within me. So that I don't just retaliate. I actually get, if you like, be on the higher ground of uplifting the other rather than that one bringing me down. Right? So transformation. And this means that our very way of thinking, our personality, our inner traits, they need that transformation so that we're not tempted to react in the old ways. And for that transformation, we definitely need a lot of inner strength and a lot of power. And this power we can get not from others, but we can get from God, from the Supreme. And it was interesting in our teachings today, we were hearing about how it's important to take a step of courage, and then God will take the step of help towards you. But if you just say to God, please help me, but you don't actually take the step of courage, then God will say, well, that's fine, but when are you going to take your step? So it's a very, again, interesting equation or principle. I need to take that first step of courage to transform myself. And often that means I look at myself, I say, this is not right. I want to transform it, but not just I want to or I will do. I definitely am doing it. That's the step of courage. There's no other possibility. It's as if it's already done. And this is what's called determination. And then, yes, God will help. I need to develop not just my relationship with all others around me, but I also need to develop my relationship with God so that I can have access to the tremendous strength that God can give me. If you think of human beings, in whatever we do, we have a limitation because we are human. God doesn't have any limitations. And he's an unlimited, I say he, no gender actually. God is an unlimited source of peace, of purity, of love, of compassion, of forgiveness, of truth. Unlimited. And in particular, the world today is very much in need of God's love. God's love is the greatest healing force in this universe, is the greatest transformative power in this universe. And this is what is needed to heal our very, very traumatized world. There's a lot of trauma in the world, and because of trauma, subconsciously, people are driven towards violent behavior. How much healing is needed? And okay, maybe I can't say to someone who's violent, well, suddenly, take God's love. They won't understand it. But I can do that myself and create that atmosphere in the world where hearts will open. I was very touched by a mother whose daughter had been killed on October 7th in Israel. And she wrote, or she said, someone wrote it down, and I remember actually most of it word for word. She said, "My daughter was killed by these monsters, but I don't want vengeance in my name." War is not the answer. War is not the solution. We need to help these people. We need to help the children who are brought up to hate. We have to make those haters into lovers. And I just found that very moving, because she came to the root of the problem. The root in the soul itself being taught to hate. Imagine. And in fact, when we think about war and the root of violence, and I've been speaking about this, the first violence that we do is to ourselves, when we suppress our own inner goodness. And that's what leaves the vacuum that leads to the ego and the anger and everything else, and the greed. Greed has a very big part to play. And it eventually leads to war. War is about my ideology, my land, etc. Actually, the earth belongs to everybody, but we are where we're at. And when I've been asked more than once, after visiting Ukraine, I haven't visited it, I was in Israel in December, actually, but of course not since the war. But the question, where is God in all this? How can God allow this? And the answer that makes sense to me, the question is, where is humanity in all this? What have we done to bring ourselves to this point? And so you can see how much transformation is needed and how much we need the healing power of God's love. And so, yes, we've talked about emotions from the personal, relational, the world stage. But you can see how the connection happens, and how when really we can bring ourselves to a state of love and purity and dignity inside, then there's hope for our world, for the transformation of our world. And really, the United Nations Charter, in the preamble, it begins with talking about upholding the dignity of others. Well, first I must uphold my own dignity. And by reacting, I'm losing my dignity. Uphold my own dignity and uphold the dignity of others. And then we will see a real change in our world. Okay, thank you. Om Shanti.
Whenever we need some advice, we need some guidance, Sister Maureen is the go-to person. If we need a little bit of clarity, we always go to Sister Maureen, and her wisdom. One of the main principal ones, definitely a go-to person to go. And you can see why. Now, Maureen Ben, I'm going to pick you up on some of the things that you said. I thought, wow, they're quite good. Self-care, self-awareness, relationships, transformations, and you talked about ego, you talked about motivation, the type of motivation we have. Now, let's come to about the self-care. I really think that you were talking very much practical points, because you said that sometimes people tend to blow because they're tired and they've not eaten, they're just drained. Now, on a world where there is so much demands, whether it's in the family or work, what can they do to take simple steps to sort of look after their well-being?
Thank you. No, it's a great question, because although I'm within the centre of BK context, there is responsibility. Although thankfully God is really responsible, but still you have to do what you have to do. And I find there are a lot of demands, and you'll know, whatever context you're in, some of the demands are quite unreasonable, actually, and often in the context of being, you teach meditation, you're expected to be perfect. Can you imagine if 1 minute you face a little, why aren't you smiling? Oh gosh, I am a human being. There are demands, certainly. And I find that what it actually is based on, how well I'm using my resources. So I know that if I'm in balance, I'm really economical with my thinking. There's a very big connection between thoughts and time. And you will experience too that if you think a lot and worry a lot, you actually waste your time. And a task that can take you half an hour may take 2 hours. So you see the connection that when you begin to be, this is definitely my experience, more economical in terms of your thinking and more present, rather than being all the time in the past or the future, but really present, then I find I can use time well. And then I can make those little pauses where I can take care of myself. And I don't always go to bed at the right time, but, that then is a question of my discipline sometimes. But I can make that routine good enough to serve me and keep me healthy. And, so I do think that there's that correlation. When we feel overwhelmed by the demands, then we take less care of ourselves. So it comes back to actually the emotional resilience. So you may then say, well, okay, but how do you take care to get the emotional resilience? Sometimes you need to take time out. Sometimes you do.
Well, some people may say, well, I have a lot of responsibility, like that, for instance, parents, looking after children, raising them up, and they need constant attention. Maybe it's someone looking after their elderly sort of relations. And how do they say, well, okay, I want to fulfill the responsibility, but I never have time for myself? Yeah. So it's almost like they're draining themselves even more. So,
but that's where you have to take time inside. Sometimes it's not physical, external time. You have to take time inside. And I know sometimes this is where we have a very good method, which many of you will know about, called traffic control. Or, excuse me, there's a website called Just a Minute, where take 1 minute out of every hour. And at the centres we'll have music playing. And just that pause gives you time to steady yourself. Makes a big difference, actually.
I tell you what, Mrs. Maureen.
Yeah.
Why don't you do that now then?
Right now?
It's 4 o'clock.
Oh, it's 4 o'clock. There you go.
I thought, why don't you give a demonstration to the audience what it means, that just a minute, that they can practice also.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just speak a little bit of my thoughts, but otherwise you would normally just do it in silence. Take a minute for myself. No one can intrude on this minute. I go into my inner world, my sanctuary, where I'm safe, I'm free, I'm at peace. I relax. I regain my composure, my dignity, my strength. I'm now ready to face the world. I think that was just 1 minute.
I don't know what to say now. You've brought me into sense of peace.
No, but could you feel it?
Yeah.
You know, and that's just a minute. Really, it's just a minute, because I watched the clock. It actually had got to, you know, it was over the 16, so it was just a minute, actually.
Yeah. So this is sort of a simple tool that people can use.
Very simple. But, you know, the pause is also so simple. Somebody asks you something, want an answer. Okay, pause. Don't just feel I have to answer in that very millisecond. You can say, okay, pause. It's not even a second sometimes, but it really makes a difference.
Coming into, building our sort of emotional stamina, which you mentioned, talked about emotional intelligence. And you certainly introduced ego.
Yes.
And you said ego was probably the root cause of a lot of conflict. Well, how do we cope with people who have ego? And if we have ego ourselves, what can we do to remove it so we can sort of at least shift away from that very sort of foundation that brings into conflict?
Because, you know, it's egos clash, no? Don't they? You will experience it. The only way I can overcome ego for myself, is to go deep into the awareness of being a soul. Because in what we say soul consciousness, there's no ego. You are your true self. Ego only comes in when you're being false, actually. So being your true self, then even if someone else comes with their ego, it doesn't impact you, because you have truth, you have dignity, right? So it's like that energy is much greater than the energy of ego. So it can't penetrate your force field. And you stay calm. I mean, you know, I experience this, you know, often really. Someone comes to talk to you and they have emotions of different kinds. And as we were coming in the car, there was this test on emotional intelligence which we did on somebody. I won't tell them the results. Well, it was a good result, actually. But it was asking you all these things. Can you read somebody's body language? Can you tell what someone is feeling? You know, all this sort of emotional intelligence. But actually, if you are calm within yourself and steady, you'll see instantly what's going on in the other person. And you'll know, okay, this is what they need, or this is what I can say to just bring them out of this. Or sometimes all you need to do is listen, actually. And listening is a great skill. And we mustn't be having our own commentary as we're listening. Otherwise, we're not listening. Right?
Now, a lot of conflict happens because, especially, you mentioned this war at homes as well, in the families, and there's conflicts between nations. And you used the word detached. And then you used another word, and loving. Well, you know, let's say you're in a family and you love your family, and each one is trying to sort of vie your support. What do you do in that situation?
Just love everybody. Well, again, you know, you see their needs and you're just one person, right? So you can be like, how can I put it, like a steady flame that people can draw on. It's not that you're trying to split the flame up, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. The flame will go out then. Do you see what I'm trying to get at? So sometimes we feel obliged. I have to fulfill everybody's needs. But actually, if we are loving ourselves, naturally people feel what they need from us, take what they need from us. That's what I find generally. And I haven't got children as such, but I feel like I've got a lot of children in a sense. And, if you stay loving and you're always available and you're available to listen, that's all that's needed. That's what I find. Now, I mean, you have children, so it might be a different dynamic. But I would say something when I think about my own parents. We were 3 children, but we never felt that we had to vie for either parent's attention. And I thought it was a great skill. They just made us feel loved. That's all somehow.
Generally, when now there's so much conflict in the world, just moving out into the wider world, and each one is trying to convince you that they're wrong and I'm right, and you want to be stable, but you don't want to upset anyone. So what path do you follow when it comes to sort of saying, okay, what you can do to help in that situation, both sides?
Yeah, because it's very important to treat all life as sacred. It's not that the lives on one side of the fence are more or less sacred than the lives on the other side of the fence. Very, very important, even though the people in the 2 camps are feeling that. But the reality is not that. Every life is sacred. And I was asked, about is it possible for somebody who's perpetrated violence to transform? And I do believe it. I've actually seen it, not necessarily in this context, but I've actually witnessed it in individuals. And I think that we have to give everybody a chance. So one is to value all life. The other is to always hold out the possibility for transformation. And the other is to hope, give out vibrations, or maybe if you're in contact with people, it's kind words, something that will help them to see that, there's light at the end of the tunnel. It may seem very dark, and in these situations it's very dark at the moment, but just to encourage them not to give up hope, don't lose, because again I was being interviewed and asked what would be your message to people in the Middle East, and I said, don't lose hope in humanity, don't lose faith, that's right, don't lose faith in humanity, don't lose faith in God, otherwise you're losing faith in yourself. And so faith plays a very crucial role at this point.
So coming to that self-awareness, I know that I've been there, I've identified with the world out there chasing after this and that. So what can we do to sort of reconnect with ourselves? What is sort of, especially people who've never even embraced this. I mean, for some, they're probably hearing this for the first time. It's not just the audience here, but it's audience online.
Yeah. Come and learn meditation. That's the simplest. But okay, you may not want to go deep into, well, just the fact that you're either in this hall or you're online means that you have an interest and you've actually made the first step. And so that's key. And that can lead to a further step to learn more. So you may want to connect with something online or connect with the centre here to learn about meditation, or you may just want to start by practicing these 1-minute pauses. But do something. If you've made the first step to come here or be online, don't let it stay here. Take another step. Otherwise, whatever you've learned here, you may have been hearing things, nodding, yes, it's good, I agree. It will all go. But if you take another step, you'll retain it and build on it. I think that's the important thing today.
However,
yes.
some people are very much trapped with their own sort of defects. They're always in a sort of a state of self-harm, or they're putting themselves down. And they can say, I can't identify with the person that you're talking about, this inner being that's an embodiment piece, because you don't know the way I behave. How on earth can I be that person that you're talking? It seems like a dream.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't convince a person by telling them, but the more that if it's somebody that you interact with regularly, you just keep that very good vision for them, and something will change. It may take time, but keep that good vision for them of their original state. So when you talk to them, when I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, so on, I'm not just talking to Paramjit. I know you're a soul. I know you have goodness inside. And you're usually pretty good anyway all the time. But even though, there are people who react and everything, and of course we all have people like that in our lives. But I know that internally their goodness is there. It's just got a little bit buried. And I don't want to let go of that vision of them. Finally, they will transform. It may take years, but they will transform.
The other thing I've noticed is that a lot of people hold on to the past.
Yes.
And they blame themselves, or they blame the others. And so this emotional baggage that they carry, how do they remove it?
It's huge. We talked about trauma, and there's so much research into trauma, and now you think about the wars going on. How many people are deeply, deeply traumatized, and that is going to stay with them. It doesn't go in 5 minutes. I think it's very important, if you feel that there's a deep trauma inside or a lot of baggage of the past, if it's really something that's troubling you and holding you back in life, then you may need to get some professional help. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. It's just the way the world is now, and these things are available. It might be counselling, whatever it is, but it's often coaching, so many things. But it's good to talk to somebody and try and work it out, because just trying to work it out on your own, you can get more and more in your stuff, and it'll become bigger. So try to get help. But the other thing is also, it's again a question of dignity and a question of choice. What do I wish to be ruled by at any one time? Do I want to be ruled by the people around me? Do I want to be ruled by the past? Or do I want to be self-aware and be the master of my own destiny? And that's dignity when you make that choice. Remembering the past doesn't allow you to be the master of your own destiny. You're then in bondage to the past. So this is the choice that we all have to make. And, often when we think of the past, the most common or two common emotions, anger and guilt. So one is anger that, why did they do that to me? Okay, it happened. Acceptance. Now self-compassion. Move on. That's self-compassion. Guilt. Well, what did I learn? Rather than what did I do wrong? What did I learn? And what is it that, and to understand that in the circumstances, I did my very best. I couldn't have done more. That was destiny. So again, accept, self-compassion, and move on.
So very much linked to this relationship that you brought up. How do we start having a wonderful relationship with the self? is there a time where I can get to know myself really well?
Yes, of course. Every morning, especially before work. We meditate very early at 4 a.m., but you can start a bit later, but I think many of you already do. But that's the time to be with yourself and to be with God and to take that strength, because then it's like you set the pattern for the day. Otherwise, if your mind is all over the place, then in the morning, it'll be all over the place the whole day. It's like the morning is the seed of the day. So set your mind, take care of your mind in the morning. I hate to say it, get up a little bit earlier so that you give yourself that little bit of time. Relationship with self, yeah. So that, so that's the first thing. And give yourself a hug sometimes. That's also nice. But, just to remind yourself as well of why God loves you. God loves every single human being. So why does God love me? There must be a reason. He can't be wrong.
Now you talked a lot about God in your presentation, but a lot of people, when you mention the word God, they tend to run in the opposite direction.
Nobody did here. I don't know about the webcast.
Because, as you said in your presentation, you said a lot of people say, well, where is God in a world of such conflict? So how do you sort of bring God into your life? What can people do who've perhaps had a very difficult, traumatized situation or experience, and how can they bring God into their lives?
I think it's about really wanting God's help. And I remember once I was traveling with Daddy Janki, who's one of our just former administrative head. She passed away in 2020. I think some of you would know her. And we were going to a prison. Not that she was going to be in prison, but we had been serving in prisons. And there was somebody who was discovered that he was very good with carpentry. And so he'd carved a beautiful desk and chair for Daddy. And he wanted to present it to her personally. And he'd done a very heinous crime, very bad crime. And so he wouldn't really be let out of prison. Anyway, when we were going in the car, I asked Daddy, I said, Daddy, there are many good people in the world, but yet God isn't sending you to them. God is sending you to this person who's sinned, not just to God's eyes, but in the eyes of the law, And she said, the answer was interesting. She said, well, there are many good people in the world, but they have arrogance of their goodness. So here's a soul who's reached the bottom and is crying out for God's help. So that's where God will send me. And so that moment where the soul realizes, I need God's help, that's where the relationship can begin to happen.
That's very nice, because you're right. I think most people have to reach their bottom, whatever that bottom is, before they can say, okay, I need to do something.
Yeah.
So,
but also some people are just, are searching for God anyway, or they're searching and then they want to know, So
in your final aspect was the transformation. And I think many people would agree that what you said was, it makes sense. But they just don't have the power. It's like, you've got this phone, it's got all the wonderful apps, but the battery is drained. So how can we sort of get that power?
You see, the thing is that we're used to everything instant today, instant coffee, instant to everything. Imagine, what did we do without mobile phones and computers? You can't even remember. Emails, we had life, right? But you know, you hold this thing in your hand, and it's a big computer in your hand. You know, so we're used to everything happening instantly, and when we want this kind of transformation, we need to be a bit patient, and we need to take small steps and let the momentum build up. But the problem is that we become impatient, and so then we throw out the success we have. So even if you get a little bit of strength from God in your meditation, that's amazing. Oh, but I didn't get all the strength I needed. Well, you won't. You get a little bit, then a little bit, then a little bit. So I think because we try to take these big jumps, we sometimes feel I haven't got the power, but we don't recognize how the power is building up bit by bit. And then, of course, it begins to accumulate and accelerate, if you like. And then you feel, yes, I really do feel that there's some inner strength and I have that guidance. But we do need to take it steady.
Would you
Sure.
lead us into that sort of
Sure.
connection? So we all have a sort of an experience.
Sure, happy to do that. I become present in this moment. Present with myself. I focus my thoughts within. I allow other thoughts to wait. I can come back to them. But right now, I wish to go on my inner journey. I wish to experience self-awareness, awareness of the inner being, the soul. The soul is energy. The soul is light. And the focus for that light is in the center of my forehead. I visualize a tiny star of light in the center of my forehead, shining brightly. And as I focus on the light, all other awareness melts away, and I become the light. And I experience my original nature of peace. I am a being of peace. This is my treasure, my eternal treasure. And in this state of peace, I can take my consciousness beyond this physical dimension to a dimension of silence, where I, the soul, am at total rest. And in the silence, I sense the presence of the divine, of God, the light. I'm drawn to the light of God. And I enter the unlimited presence of God. Unlimited peace, unlimited love, unlimited truth. I absorb strength from God. I absorb love into myself so that I'm able to heal many things of the past. This unlimited, unconditional love not only heals, but also transforms in such a way that negativity can no longer have any impact on me. God's love makes me free. I allow the love to overflow through me and out into the world to bring that healing presence, to comfort hearts, to give strength. This is the power of God's love. Gradually, I return to my body, the awareness of my body and my surroundings. Transformed and determined to be the master of my own destiny. Om Shanti. I am peace.